Good afternoon and welcome from the War Remnants Museum, Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, on Thursday the 12th of March 2026. So I've just arrived here on a grab motorcycle, and from where I'm staying right in the centre of town, it was only about a K away, and it's unbelievably cheap to travel by grab within Vietnam. It was sort of 20,000 dong, which is about 75 US cents. So the entrance to the museum cost is 40,000 dong, which is $1.5 US, so it's unbelievably cheap. It is quite busy. It's just gone midday, and it is quite a lot of people here already. I would presume it's probably the busiest museum within the city, and it appears that there's like a lot of tour groups that come here. And a good mix of sort of tourists. There seems to be some larger Indian and Chinese tour groups that were here, which I haven't really seen the organised groups when I've been walking around the city. But there's a great display of aviation, armaments and artillery pieces outside. We'll head inside and we'll see what's going on. So there's some interesting displays of small arms inside. So you've got the old Thompson machine gun, the famous M1, obviously the pump action 12 gauge shotguns for within the jungle. And I suppose this is when small submachine guns became popular in modern warfare. 9mm, high fire rate, small size. The M16, which I suppose changed the West's idea of a personal assault rifle. It's one there with the underslung grenade launcher. And then the variation of the 16, the M18 Commandos, the shorter carbine versions. Moving on to the heavier magazine-fed machine guns, and 250 cal pieces there. I suppose these are the famous 50 cal Vietnam weapons, the Brownings, which were mounted on many armaments and boats. Browning M2. Hydraulic or electric fed minigun, which, as long as you've got enough ammunition, can give between 4,000 and 6,000 rounds per minute. And the iconic M60 7.62 belt fed machine gun. The sort of huge 50 cals which are here would be vehicle mounted, patrol boat mounted, but they are unbelievably effective on huge ranges. Shoulder launched rocket systems. That would be the famous infantryman's extendable disposable rocket launcher. And then you've got the M72 here, which is the 66mm heat weapon. So that's high explosive anti-tank, and it would have a conical shaped cutting charge within the end. So on impact, in there's a copper cone which liquefies, which turns to molten copper, and that's used to pierce through armour, so that the explosion can go within inside the armour. I'm just in a section now which is documenting the use of chemical warfare in the Vietnam War, and I've just seen a sign there saying that about 80 million litres of Agent Orange were dumped all within the war, and obviously the ramifications of that are cancers, deformities, and obviously all the people that died there. There's a selection of gas masks here, and for anybody that's ever worn one for even just an hour or so, just to wear it and do nothing is horrific. To wear it and actually have to do physical work is sort of enough to break you. And chemical warfare is such an horrible situation to be in war, and it really shouldn't be part of modern day warfare. And these are some of the deformities and abnormalities that were produced from these chemicals that were dumped indiscriminately throughout the war. There's also a small section dedicated to the photographers that died in the Vietnam War. If you're interested in photography, there's some outstanding collections of war photography, and I must admit a lot of it is quite heavy going and wouldn't be for everybody. Some of it is quite gruesome, when you're sort of seeing the effects of war atrocities and things like that. But it's a very impressive collection. So when I visit military museums, wherever it seems to be, I always seem to find weapons that are from days gone by that are still used today. So this is a 75mm recoilless rifle, and the irony of this is that this weapon was used by the Taliban in Afghanistan against American troops, and it was produced by America, obviously, to kill other troops. It's weapons like this, even though they look dated, they are still actually being used to this day in conflicts all around the world, especially in places like Africa and the less developed countries in the Middle East. So I've just come into a section which is documenting Condau prison, and I've actually got a real guillotine in here that's been used. Obviously the cage which the prisoner would be kept in before the execution, and the weighted steel blade that would end his life. It's a pretty sobering thing to see. So these are the famous tiger cages which prisoners would be placed inside in the baking heat. Obviously there's not enough room to stand up, there's enough to stretch out, but just to be kept in a stress position in the sun, dehydrated, malnutrition, it must be absolutely horrific. Personally sort of find things like this so disturbing. So this is just a piece of logistics matting which would have been laid on routes to stop tanks and trucks from tearing up the ground, until somebody decided that if you laid this on the floor and turned it upside down, you'd be able to drag a human being back and forth over it to rip them to pieces. And I think when you visit places like this, you find that human beings will find many ways to sort of brutalise each other within situations of war. It's so sad. So I'm just outside now looking at the aviation and armaments display. So we've obviously got the workhorse for the cavalry, the Huey 1 with the minigun pointing out of the window. You won't want to be on the business end of that. Hydraulic or electric powered, around 6,000 rounds per minute if available. Yeah, but certainly a serious piece of equipment. A1 Skyraider. U-17. F5 Alpha Fast Air.
Quand même, c'est un peu con. Comme ça.
An A-37 fighter bomber. So this lightweight assault boat I find quite interesting. It's only a single skin of aluminium, so there'd be zero protection from incoming fire basically. The poor guy that was mounting the M60 on the front would have been lifted so high up out of the water, he'd be in a pretty bad position. Even from sort of 7.62, that aluminium's not going to be stopping anything. Anti-aircraft guns that always got turned into heavy ground support weapons. And this 106 recoilless rifle, even though it's a vintage piece of equipment, these are still being used today as we speak. I've come across these in Afghanistan, and they are still lingering about all over Asia and the Middle East. The old M17 self-propelled armament, 175mm artillery piece, self-propelled, and still a similar type of system that is used in modern warfare, obviously just upgraded. A 155 howitzer, and a 105. The famous armoured personnel carrier M32. This one's fitted with a flamethrower. And for all you combat engineers out here, got an old bulldozer. I think there was around 1,500 bulldozers in theatre, sort of at the peak of the war. The M41, mounted with a 50 cal Browning. And even for people that have served in recent conflicts, whether that be Afghan, Iraq, Syria, the old Chinook. And I flew on a Chinook on my last operational tour, on my actual last live operation called Op Calbait. And I was on, obviously a more modern one, but I was on a Chinook, absolutely petrified in my last minutes in Afghanistan, and I was so glad to get off it. Right, that's about everything I can show you here. I've really enjoyed this visit. It's been a great visit, and for the price, if you're in town, even if you just come for an hour, it's well worth checking out. I'd say 2 hours maximum you're going to be spending here. I presume if you get here a little bit later in the day, maybe it might be better coming sort of about 3 o'clock. It closes at 5, so you might get it a little bit quieter because it is quite busy. Obviously you've got to be prepared for some very graphic photography, and some of it's sort of involving children as well. It's very heavy going, so if that's not your type of thing, maybe it's worth giving it a miss. But if you want to visit and get a bit better perspective on the Vietnam War, it's well worth visiting. So if you've got all the way to the end of the video, thank you very much for watching. Any comments, questions, just leave them below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Cheers.